I still remember the sound of the pen clicking in that cold glass conference room. One of those sleek spaces where everything looks transparent except the truth. Just routine paperwork, Ethan had said, sliding the folder across the table. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and I like a fool thought it was fatigue. We were in the middle of Series B funding after all. Long nights, endless pitches, breakthroughs on the cusp. I told myself he was just tired. I didn't read it. I just signed. After everything we'd built, why wouldn't I? 3 years earlier, we were nothing, just two underpaid researchers eating noodles at midnight and sketching molecules on napkins. I brought the science, he brought the charm. Ethan could make a banker feel like a visionary. I used to joke that if I ever cured cancer, it'd be because he convinced someone to fund my lunch break. We were never a couple, not like that, but we were bonded. He knew how much I gave up. The tenure-track job I turned down. The wedding I postponed. The savings I emptied to rent our first lab bench. We were in it together. Or so I thought. That morning, the board didn't even look me in the eye. They nodded politely like I was an intern being thanked for her coffee runs. Ethan stood there in his tailored navy blazer, explaining things in calm legalese. "We're restructuring," he said. "This agreement compensates your contributions fairly and allows you to transition gracefully." Gracefully, I donated my blood to those centrifuges. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the signature line and wondered when I became someone they could erase so easily. When I walked out, it was raining. Seattle rain. Cold, constant, almost invisible, like betrayal in slow motion. I had no title, no shares, no farewell party. Just a tote bag full of notebooks and a mind too full to breathe. I didn't know it yet, but 10 days earlier, I'd filed something else. A provisional patent. My own name, my own data. No witnesses. They thought they were buying me out for pennies. They didn't know they were leaving $40 million on the table. I didn't grow up around money. I grew up in a one-stoplight town in rural Montana, where kids cleaned out horse stalls for allowance and thought biotech was a brand of fertilizer. My love affair with science began in a dusty garage, with a second-hand microscope my uncle found at a pawn shop. I spent summers dissecting flowers, cataloging bugs, and logging soil pH like it was a game. My parents were kind but practical. They didn't understand why their daughter wanted to spend Christmas break testing bacteria from pond water, but they never stopped me either. When I got into Stanford, they sold my dad's vintage truck to help cover my flight and books. "Go change the world," he said, hugging me goodbye. "But don't let the world change you." I think about that a lot lately. At Stanford, I buried myself in molecular biology. While others partied, I pipetted. I was never the loudest voice in the room, but I was the one people called when they needed real results. That's how I met Ethan during a grad research exchange in Boston. He wasn't a scientist, not really. Ethan had a biology undergrad, but his real gift was persuasion. He could charm the rust off a nail. He once told me, "You do the hard stuff, I'll make them believe in it." And for a while, that balance worked. After graduation, we both turned down stable jobs to chase something bigger, our own company. We rented a shoebox office in an industrial park outside Seattle, where the Wi-Fi barely worked and the air smelled like insulation glue. But to us, it was a temple. I lived off ramen and student loan leftovers, working 16-hour days to perfect our protein sequencing platform. Ethan pitched our vision to every venture capitalist who'd take a meeting. It wasn't just business, it was purpose. We weren't trying to get rich, we were trying to save lives. Our technology could identify rare disease markers in hours, not weeks. I told myself that would protect us, that when you build something this meaningful, greed can't survive inside it. I was wrong. As the company grew, so did the meetings I wasn't invited to. The decks Ethan showed me weren't always the final ones. When I questioned a few small revisions to our board structure, he reassured me with that easy grin, "Relax, Lena. You're the soul of this place. They'd be nothing without you." But soul doesn't hold up in court. Titles do. Equity does. And I had neither. The truth is, I didn't pay attention to the business side. Because I didn't care about power, I cared about the work. I believed that if I stayed honest and kept doing what mattered, the system would honor that. I didn't see the moment the mission stopped being the compass and started being the cover. By the time I noticed, the map had already changed. And I wasn't on it anymore. It didn't happen overnight. That's the cruelty of it, how quiet betrayal can be when it dresses up as progress. At first, it was small things. Investor calls scheduled during my lab hours, then recapped later by Ethan with his usual, "Don't worry, I handled it," smile. Or pitch decks I hadn't seen before being flashed on screen during meetings where my research had been simplified into buzzwords I'd never used. Next-gen plug-and-play disruptive. The first time I raised a concern, he waved it off. "Lena, they don't care about the mechanics. They care about the story. Let me tell it." So I let him. Then came the staff changes. We'd finally secured Series B funding and were scaling up fast. I was thrilled. More hands, more minds meant faster breakthroughs. But Ethan's hires were different. Glossy resumes, sharp suits, louder voices. One in particular, a junior analyst named Colin with a background in data visualization, started trailing Ethan like a golden retriever. I didn't think much of it until he showed up one Monday morning with a new title on his badge, Chief Innovation Officer. I stared at it for a full minute. Chief Innovation Officer. That had always been me unofficially. I created the platform, optimized the algorithms, filed the earliest patents. Colin hadn't even touched a pipette. When I confronted Ethan about it, he shrugged. "You're the chief scientist, Lena. You don't need a title to prove that." But I did. I just didn't know it yet. Investor updates used to include my full reports. Now my name was relegated to the appendix, sometimes missing entirely. I asked our communications lead, a kind woman named Priya, what had changed. She hesitated. "I'm told to keep it high level. Ethan says technical details overwhelm them." My work was technical detail now. Still, I kept working. Because I believed in the science. In the kids with undiagnosed disorders, we could finally help. In the aging patients, we might give more time. I told myself that ego had no place in a lab, that I was above politics, but it wore on me. The silence. The polite nods in meetings followed by Ethan rephrasing my points like they were his own. The subtle tightening of space around me. One day I walked into our glass conference room and realized I hadn't been invited. The team barely looked up. I had become a ghost in the building I helped create. And I still told myself it was worth it. I should have known something was wrong the moment Ethan booked the meeting himself. No assistant, no calendar invite. Just a casual, "Hey, can we chat for 5 minutes after lunch?" The tone was disarming, too soft, too rehearsed. I stepped into the conference room and everything about it felt sterile intentionally. So, no coffee, no notes, just a manila folder and a non-disclosure agreement. He started with compliments, which was always a red flag. "You've been the heart of the lab, Lena. This wouldn't exist without you." Then he leaned back and clasped his hands like a TED Talk speaker. "But as we prepare for the next phase, the board feels it's time to streamline operations. Too many founders can dilute clarity." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means we're offering you a graceful exit. No animosity, just a clean, fair buyout." He slid the folder across the glass table. Inside, a check for $30,000 and a simple separation agreement. "Fair compensation for your lab support over the years," it read. Lab support. Not co-founder. Not chief scientist. Not inventor of the diagnostic algorithm that launched our company in the first place. "You're serious?" I asked. My voice didn't tremble, but my spine did. "It's better this way," he said, like he was offering me mercy. "You always said you didn't care about the business side." That wasn't true. I said I cared more about the science, but that didn't mean I was blind. Or that I deserved to be erased. Still, I signed. I don't even know why. Maybe I was too stunned, too tired. Maybe some small broken part of me still trusted him, wanted to believe this wasn't a knife in my back, but just a bad decision we'd laugh about later. But it was a knife. That evening, I returned to the lab to gather my notes. In the executive drive, I spotted a document left open on Ethan's laptop. It was a slide deck dated the week before, my research, my clinical trial data, my patient models only this time. The author was Dr. Ethan Caldwell. The punchline came 3 days later when Priya texted me. Did you know they're filing your algorithm as company IP this Friday private board vote? You're not on the email list anymore. My vision blurred. I had spent years building something I believed could change lives. And I'd just sold it for the price of a used car. 1 week before Ethan handed me that insult of a check, I did something I hadn't told anyone, not even my closest friend at the lab. I walked into a patent lawyer's office. It wasn't a dramatic decision. No grand plan, no revenge fantasy. Just a quiet unease I couldn't name back then, like a fire alarm before the smoke. The attorney's name was Claire Lindstrom. Small office tucked above a bakery in Capitol Hill. She wore wireframe glasses and didn't blink when I showed her my lab notebooks. Your name's on everything, she said, flipping through the densely packed pages. Sequential signatures, timestamps, formulation logs. This is gold. I remember wringing my hands. I don't know if I'm being paranoid. He's my partner. We've always said we'd file jointly. She didn't smile. She just said trust is good. Paperwork is better. So we filed a provisional patent. Nothing flashy. No press release. No firm announcement. Just my name tucked quietly into the USPTO database. Filed under Hartley Method for Accelerated Protein Isolation in Autoimmune Diagnostics. The process that had taken me 3 years and 100 failed trials to perfect. I walked out of Claire's office with a receipt in my purse and a strange sense of peace in my chest. I still thought Ethan wouldn't betray me, but now if he did, I wasn't entirely defenseless. And when the betrayal came swift and surgical, I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I simply opened that filing confirmation email and stared at my name sitting there like a small but immovable stone. Claire had said something else that stuck with me. People assume ideas don't belong to women. You'll have to prove it 3 times over, but once you do, make sure the paper trail is bulletproof. She was right. Ethan could erase my name from decks. He could buy me out for the price of a high-end blender. But he couldn't undo that filing timestamp. He couldn't delete the records I'd quietly documented for years. And he couldn't see what was coming next. I hadn't just lost a company. I'd just become the sole legal owner of its crown jewel. The call was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. Ethan's voice, syrupy and sure, greeted the room like a showman stepping onto a Broadway stage. Thank you all for being here. We're on the cusp of something transformative, he began. Our team has finalized the core technology for autoimmune diagnostics, what we internally call the Hartley Method. It's proprietary, protected, and it works. My chest tightened at that last word. Proprietary. I was already in the Zoom waiting room. My video off, my mic muted. Claire sat beside me, steady as ever, her laptop open and already recording. I watched the parade of suits dial in, investors from Boston, New York, San Diego. Familiar names. Some I'd helped pitch to, back when I thought I had a future here. Ethan continued oblivious. With this breakthrough, our IPO projection moves from Q4 to Q2. We expect the valuation to exceed $80 million. Minimum. They clapped. Literal applause broke out. Then Claire gave me a nod. I unmuted. Excuse me. The room paused. Some faces blinked. Ethan froze. This is Dr. Lena Hartley. I'm here with my legal counsel. I'd like it on record that the patent Ethan Caldwell just mentioned, the Hartley Method, is filed solely under my name. I dropped the number like a lit match. U.S. Provisional Patent Application. Number 63947-082. Silence. Ethan's face shifted from confusion to forced calm. That must be a misunderstanding. Lena worked with the team. Yes, but this was developed through company resources, Claire spoke now. According to the documentation, the research predates the formal incorporation of your company. Ms. Hartley's lab notebooks are signed, witnessed, and time-stamped. She owns the methodology. Any use of it without licensing is patent infringement. The air in the room turned acidic. Is this a joke? One investor asked. Another leaned forward. So the breakthrough you're touting on this call, it doesn't legally belong to the company. Third chimed in. Ethan, were you aware of this filing? He stammered. It must have been a precaution. She was emotional when she left. I'm sure we can settle this internally. Claire didn't even flinch. We're open to a settlement. But let's be clear, your client filed SEC documents suggesting full ownership of IP he doesn't legally control. That's called misrepresentation. Someone hung up. Another investor cursed under his breath. Then the room erupted: questions, legal concerns, exit strategy talk. IPO mentions vanished. They were already scrambling. Ethan stared into the camera like a man whose parachute hadn't opened. And I turned off my video, muted again. Because justice didn't have to shout. It just had to show up on the call with the paperwork to prove it. The next morning, my inbox was a battlefield. Dr. Hartley cared a comment on sabotaging your own company. Is this personal revenge or professional rivalry? Anonymous source claims you're bitter over a breakup. True. The headlines were worse. The woman who burned her own company to the ground. Vindictive genius or career suicide. Ethan moved fast. His PR firm leaked a curated narrative to TechView and FounderWire. It painted me as unstable, over-emotional, and ungrateful. He didn't use my name directly, but the breadcrumbs weren't hard to follow. I read it all in silence, the articles blurring into noise. Claire, my lawyer, leaned against her desk, arms crossed. Classic tactic, she said. Make the woman look irrational so no one questions the theft. I nodded slowly. They're calling me Medea with a microscope. They always do. Until you win. But winning didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing in the ruins of something I built with love. I tried to disappear for a few days. Took long walks through Discovery Park. Deleted Twitter from my phone. But the backlash kept finding me until it didn't. A quiet post showed up on Medium. She was the science. Everyone knew it. We didn't speak up. We needed the jobs. Then another post from a former intern. Then 3 more, including one from a former investor who admitted he'd been misled by Ethan's charisma. By Friday, an email landed in my inbox with the subject line, "We see you." It was from a small VC firm in San Francisco, female-founded, science-backed. Their partners weren't looking for flashy decks. They wanted substance, truth, battle scars. One of them had even cited one of my early papers in her PhD dissertation. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know what I wanted to build next, or if I had the strength. But I knew one thing with perfect clarity: I would never again beg to be kept in a room I helped design. So I typed 2 words, "Let's talk." And for the first time in months, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. I moved to San Diego with nothing but my research journals, a worn-out backpack, and the quiet resolve to begin again, this time on my terms. No more VC boardrooms lined with slick smiles. No more pretending I didn't see the red flags. No more sacrificing credit for team harmony. I rented a modest space in an old industrial building near Torrey Pines. 1 lab bench, 2 microscopes, and a coffee machine that whined louder than it brewed. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I called it the Hartley Initiative, not because I needed the world to remember my name, but because I needed the next generation to remember their own worth. Our mission was simple: fund, mentor, and support female scientists, especially those whose brilliance had been overlooked, out-talked, or outright stolen. Within months, we launched microgrants for underrepresented cancer researchers. One of them, Dr. Rashida Okafor discovered a novel enzyme interaction that redefined early-stage detection models. Another team was developing biodegradable implants for post-chemo tissue repair. I kept my head down, refused interviews, turned down podcast requests. When reporters reached out about the $40 million patent dispute, I politely declined. I wasn't building a redemption arc. I was building a sanctuary. But the world, it seems, had a longer memory than I thought. One afternoon, I walked into the lab to find my team unusually quiet, eyes flicking toward the screen on the far wall. I turned just in time to see the headline scroll across the local news ticker, molecule that sparked, $40 million investment traced to Montana-born scientists below it. A photograph of me, smiling in a lab coat years ago before the betrayal, before the silence. 2 hours later, an email hit my inbox. We'd be honored if you'd speak at the Women in Biotech Summit. They'd already titled the talk, The Inventor Behind the Breakthrough. I stared at the subject line for a long time. This time, I didn't hesitate, happy to. Because maybe being seen wasn't the danger I thought it was. Maybe now it was power. The lab was quiet in the early morning, just the soft hum of equipment and the faint tap of someone's fingers on a keyboard down the hall. I walked past the communal workbench, where 2 interns had left a scribbled napkin filled with equations and coffee stains. They'd been arguing about protein folding last night, loud, unfiltered, full of fire. It made me smile. No shareholders, no board agendas, just science, just possibility. My office was a corner cubicle glass on 2 sides, sunlight flooding in as the ocean breeze rustled a nearby palm. On the windowsill, someone had left a wildflower from the trails above the cliffs. I sat down, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old photo. It was from the early days, me and Ethan, arms slung around each other, beaming. Back when we thought building something together meant we were safe from ambition. Back when I thought being the brains would protect me from being erased. I traced the edge of the picture, then set it aside gently. He once said I wasn't strategic enough to lead, that I lacked vision, that I didn't know how to play the game. But here's what he never saw. I was smart enough to leave. Smart enough to take the notebooks. Smart enough to keep my name on the patent. Smart enough to walk away from the boardroom, but not from the work. He wanted credit. He wanted control. But what I had was worth more. Legacy. And that can't be bought out, not for $40 million, not for any price. Not for